My name is Alan McCormick. I'm the chairman of the Legatum Institute. And on behalf of my colleagues and my fellow trustees, welcome. For us, this is one of the most exciting nights of our year, the launch of the 2016 Prosperity Index. And we're delighted to be able to share the news of the Prosperity Index with you tonight. But tonight is also special for a couple of other reasons. This is also the 10th edition of the Prosperity Index. And this is an index that was actually forged in a small rented office just around the corner from here 11 or 12 years ago now. My colleagues and I manage an investment business that's been investing in global capital markets for the best part of 30 years. And we've often found ourselves pondering the question. A lot of our activities have been in emerging markets, but we found ourselves pondering the question, why are some countries rich and others poor? Why can some countries translate their national success and be able to repeat it over and again? And why are some countries able to get that unique blend of wealth and also well-being? And so we set about on the task of studying that and coming to understand it. We actually went to Oxford. We employed the consultancy Oxford Analytica, and I saw Davy Young here tonight, so people in the room were part of forging that story. And I can tell you now that the index has now been downloaded millions of times. We've had over, I think it's 4 million visitors to our website, and in November alone, we had 400,000 visitors to prosperity.com. So it's very exciting to see where we've come to, and it's now used in universities across the world and really starting to shift the conversation about what is prosperity, what makes life worthwhile, what are the ingredients to human flourishing. The second reason that this is an exciting night is because it marks the inaugural moment when our new CEO, Philippa Stroud, comes and presents to us. We're so excited that Philippa is leading the Institute. She has a unique clarity of vision, born from her experience in Hong Kong and also in the UK, and some of the hardest places in our country. She took that experience to Westminster with the founding of the Centre for Social Justice, and then on into coalition government, where she was an architect of the government's major welfare reforms. More recently, she was elevated to the House of Lords. And after all of that, she came to join us here on Monday. And I have to say, having worked with her for 4 days, I found myself utterly exhausted. So along with my fellow trustees, can I welcome Philippa to the stage? We're really looking forward to the launch of the index, and also, as Philippa articulates, our new vision. Thank you, everybody.
Alan, thank you so much. And it is just so special to be with you tonight and to be able to be here for the launch of the 10th Legatum Prosperity Index. It's a huge privilege for me. I wanted to be here for this occasion, and I'm so pleased that I was able to join you. Tonight, though, as I've been chatting with different ones of you in the room, you've said things to me like, I really love what Legatum does, but actually don't always understand its vision. So there actually couldn't be a better moment than on the eve of our anniversary than to actually focus down onto the core mission of the Legatum Institute. We were created 10 years ago in order to create the pathways from poverty to prosperity across the world in order to see everyone flourish nationally and internationally. We wanted to shape the ideas, the values, and the policies that would drive that change and lead to flourishing of different lives and different communities. And we wanted to drive those ideas globally in order to see everyone prosper. At the Institute, we've been doing this by creating a world-class Centre for Metrics. We highlight and create data to provide accountability for what really leads to prosperous communities and what does not. And we will see that in action tonight with some of the findings from the Prosperity Index. We harness the drivers in those metrics to transformational research. So each of the pillars of the Prosperity Index that you see tonight will actually drive our research. We gather world leaders with a transformational vision in order to build an unstoppable movement of people like yourselves who share our values and our principles and want to see that change delivered in this nation and in other nations across the world. But tonight we're not only celebrating our 10-year anniversary, we're also celebrating the launch of the Prosperity Index, which is the cornerstone of the Institute's metrics program. I've spent my whole adult life focused on creating pathways from poverty and creating ways out of poverty for people. And what I learned was that when you are supporting a person, a community, or a nation to change, you have to paint a picture of what that journey is going to be for them, how they're going to get there. The Prosperity Index is designed to bring to life all the drivers that are required for human flourishing. At Legatum, prosperity means not only economic well-being, but also social well-being. Not only what we're getting, but who we're becoming as people, as communities, and as nations. This short video that we're going to watch sums up the heartbeat of the Institute and the pillars of the Prosperity Index. Each of those different themes that you saw in that video represents a different pillar of the Prosperity Index. And I'm now going to invite Giles and Alexandra to the stage to unpack the findings of that Prosperity Index. Giles, Alexandra, over to you.
Thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Giles Dillon. I'm the Director of Communications for the Legatum Institute. This is Alexandra Mousavizadeh, who is the Director of the Prosperity Index. And I think the Institute and its friends owe Alexandra and her team a great debt of gratitude, because they produced an absolutely fine report. But we owe them a debt of gratitude for more than that. Their constant insistence on only using the most robust data. If it doesn't pass the smell test, they don't use it. For bringing in a new revised methodology this year, bringing a sharper focus to the world through that prism you've just seen, through prosperity. We've done that so far by, yes, of course, analysing economic quality, because that's important, but we also view business opportunity, governance, health, education, personal freedoms, safety and security, probably most important, social capital, and a new sub-indice, which Alexandra's team have brought in, natural environment. Not just about how pretty a place is, but how that environment has been managed and how it affects the people that live within it. So, we have this fantastic report, and we're extremely pleased with it, and thank you to your team for all the work that they put into it. But we don't just want this to be a celebration. Have a drink, please do. But it's not just about a moment in November 2016. Don't just pick it up and leave it in the cab on the way home. Take it home with you and read it, because what we want is this to become a reference point for you, whether you're a journalist, policymaker, or just generally interested. Over the next 12 months, you can go back to this and see the world as it is. There is an interactive website. I beg you to explore it over the coming months, until we produce the next one, obviously, because it will give you a view of the world. This set of 149 countries ranked in order of prosperity. But Alexandra, it's not just about the rankings, is it?
Well, absolutely right, Giles. While rankings are incredibly important and are a clear indication of how countries are performing, and national leaders and government officials pay close attention to where they are positioned on the index and why, it's not the whole story. I mean, what we also look at is and what is a clear indication of success is how countries convert their wealth into prosperity. And that's one of the core themes that we explore in this year's index. And on the chart above, you can see that play out. The countries above the line are the countries that are delivering more prosperity than their GDP otherwise would suggest. And the countries below the line are the countries that deliver less. Now, no one would be surprised to find that Norway does well and Sudan doesn't, both in terms of rankings and delivery. But what is incredibly interesting are looking at the countries that punch above their weight, the countries that are not necessarily particularly wealthy, but are delivering a lot more prosperity than their GDP would otherwise suggest. And it is this group of countries where we find models for success, where we can start to map out the sequence of policy priorities that lead to greater prosperity.
The Institute's friends obviously are not all British. I know many of you aren't, but humour me for a moment. We are in London. How does the UK do? Is it good news for the UK?
Well, the UK is a great example of strong prosperity delivery. The UK ranks 10th on the overall index, but it ranks 3rd in the world when it comes to converting its wealth into prosperity. And that's just behind Finland and New Zealand. Now, just a few weeks ago, we published our UK Prosperity Index, where we took our Prosperity Index framework methodology and we mapped it on the UK across 389 local government authorities. And although the UK does incredibly well overall, what we found was that it wasn't doing that well in terms of distributing the prosperity evenly across the country. And in fact, in Glasgow, life expectancy is lower than that in China. And in Renfrewshire, people feel less safe than in Jamaica. And in Middlesbrough, people feel less secure on their incomes than people do in Ethiopia.
That's a pretty staggering stat. A lot of people's attention next week is going to be focused not here, but across the Atlantic. Probably the most contentious, divisive election campaign we've seen in a very long time. Does that tell us something about where the US is at? And whichever person wins the US presidency, what are they going to inherit in terms of prosperity?
Well, one of the significant findings over the last decade of our prosperity analysis is that the US prosperity has actually been in relative decline. And while the US actually does quite well in the index and ranks 17th overall and actually is above the line on the delivery curve, in absolute terms, the US prosperity has stagnated since 2007 in spite of rising wealth levels and in spite of the rest of the world's prosperity rising. Now, this stagnation we see manifest itself in the survey data that we incorporate in the index. And for example, compared to 10 years ago, more Americans feel less satisfied on their living standards. And compared to 10 years ago, more Americans are reporting difficulty in finding basic food and shelter. And today, Ecuadorians feel safer in their country than Americans do in theirs. So this sense of stagnation might explain some of the anti-establishment sentiment that we're seeing dominate the US elections currently.
Okay, well, we've only focused on 2 countries. It's 149 in the index. A lot of these indices are always seen as a snapshot in time, but the secret is we think you can look at it a little bit further than that, but can you actually predict prosperity growth?
We try. We try and identify the countries that are best positioned to take off in terms of prosperity in the future. And now with a decade of data, we look back and we see what were the conditions for the countries that did incredibly well over the last decade, and where had they made the improvements to accelerate in their prosperity gains. And we found 3 areas. It was governance and social capital and education, the foundational pillars of prosperity, where they had made the biggest improvements before takeoff. And sort of based on that, and looking through that lens, we pinpointed 4 countries: Vietnam, Indonesia, Poland, and the Philippines. We call them the VIP countries, and we believe that these are the ones to watch in terms of potential acceleration in prosperity gains, and are those countries we believe can start to contribute more to global prosperity growth. But the good news is that global prosperity is actually at its highest point in the last 10 years, and that global prosperity inequality is actually falling. So let me just leave you with 3 questions that stem from this year's index. And the first one is, can the index tell us about some of the underlying reasons for the rise in populism across Europe? And secondly, why is it that prosperity is so easily lost and gained in Latin America when that is not the case in Asia or other regions around the world? And thirdly, the prosperity gains obtained in India and in China, for example, are these set to continue? Now, can we identify anything that might be holding these countries back in terms of progressing in the future? And these and many other questions are areas that we tackle and address in this year's Prosperity Index report. And I hope you enjoy it. Thank you very much.
One of the fascinating areas and questions that I think is most important also out of that is, what is that magic formula? What is the secret between democracy and prosperity?
Absolutely.
And the combination of that? If that's not enough questions, and there's plenty more that it does tackle, to entice you to explore the report, to read the report, to go back and refer to it in the future, and to explore that website, it is absolutely fantastic. I don't know what is. Thank you very much indeed for your time. I'm going to leave you with Philippa to introduce our very special guest speaker.
So if you're a businessman here, or if you're involved in politics, or if you're involved in social policy, academia, health, education, any different field, we hope that you will read the Prosperity Index, use it as a resource, keep it on your desk. It should be absolutely a resource for you throughout the year. But I am delighted this evening also to be able to introduce Helle Thorning-Schmidt, former Prime Minister of Denmark and the new CEO of Save the Children. We were absolutely thrilled that she accepted the invitation to come and join us as somebody who values metrics and their importance in government to guiding policy making, guiding good decisions, and guiding great outcomes. So Helle, it's my absolute privilege to welcome you to the stage, and thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you very much, Philippa, for that amazing introduction. I'm simply delighted to be here today. And it feels like a very big honor to be able to mark your 10th anniversary for the Legatum Prosperity Index. Thank you for inviting me. It's also kind of cool to be part of a community that just loves data, that just say data is the best thing, and we believe that data can change the world. I'm delighted to be part of that community, so thank you again for inviting me in. This is a very significant report. I can see you all clutching it in your hands, and that is because we all feel that it is significant, because it reminds us all so clearly that measuring prosperity is not just about income and wealth. No, as we saw in the film just before, it is also about well-being. And I think it was Senator Bobby Kennedy who actually said it best when he, back in 1968, remarked, and he said, "GDP measures everything except that which makes life worthwhile." And it is this perspective, I believe, that underpins a long tradition of which the Prosperity Index is part. And that you should be very proud of. A long tradition of researchers and social reformers that were using the power of data to move public perceptions and public policies closer to a better and more holistic understanding of development, not simply as having more, but also of being more. And that is what your film shows as well. And this is something that have had a considerable impact on the global policies. Look at the 19th century London, not very far from here. Two social reformers, Charles Booth and Beatrice Webb, gathered data to enable people, in the words of Booth, to connect poverty and well-being with the conditions of employment. That's what they thought back then. And of course, this work that they did was highly influential and sowed the seeds of what you could call the modern-day welfare system in the UK. In the 20th century, the Human Development Index that was pioneered by the Pakistani economist Mahbub ul Haq helped instill a more people-centered approach to development. And I believe that actually this led to focus on a broader development goals among policymakers, where we included universal education and health coverage as part of fostering economic growth. Again, data helped us broaden our views of things. As you heard, I have been Prime Minister in Denmark, and that was a privilege, of course. But it was a privilege mainly because to lead a country where we are trying to put all these data and all this knowledge into practice every day is, of course, an honor. We know in the Nordic welfare model that prosperity depends on much more than a country's GDP. And the Nordic model of development, of course, which is often held up as an example, is not the only one, but what we try to do is to actually put into practice an economic system that is focused on equality of opportunity, access to universal health care, and of course education services, and a strong investment in children, families and communities to ensure that people feel not only wealthy, because that's not enough, but ensure that people feel safe, secure, and not least confident about their future. That is what creates the well-being and the prosperity. Now I have changed focus. I am now with Save the Children, which is a fantastic organization. For almost 100 years we have tried to help children worldwide. And of course I'm inspired to try and create and foster this kind of prosperity for children across the globe. And I can assure you that the work you're doing here will help us do our job to help children. And we have to be honest. If we seek to achieve truly global prosperity, it's a big goal, but it's good to have that goal. If we want to achieve that, we need to make sure that we focus in on the poorest, most vulnerable, and the most deprived children of this world. These are the children that the world have left behind, and these children must be our first priority. I believe that if we want to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals that everyone is talking so much about now, if we want to tackle, we need to tackle the specific obstacles that are facing the children that are left behind. We know that children that are left behind, they're not only poor. If that was the case, we could help them much easier. No, they're left behind because they experience a toxic cocktail of being poor, but also actively discriminated against. Because they are disabled, because they belong to a certain ethnic or minority background, or simply because they are girls. These are the children we want to get to, and I believe that a Prosperity Index can help get to these children. How? First of all, by challenging and changing people's attitudes and behavior, but at the same time influencing governments with a figure that you have found that will change the world. And that's why I believe that the Prosperity Index is a valuable resource for all of us who want to try and change the world, to bring prosperity to the poorest people. Why? Because first of all, it draws our attention to those parts of the globe that we might not know a lot about. And it forces us to ask the questions when we have the data. Second, it will help us see emerging problems and also suggest where policy changes could be useful and where they could be most useful. And finally, the index uses data as a tool for change in a way that we know can have an impact for decades to come and for these children. That is why the work you are doing is not just mapping the world, it is actually helping all of us to try to change the world. Reading this report had made me feel so pleased as to how far we have actually come as a global community in terms of trying to understand and responding to the challenges we face together, and to try to create a more sustainable development and prosperity for all. You will help and you will be part of that. And at the same time, as we see how far we have come, we are unfortunately also reminded how far we have to go. But I feel inspired tonight, inspired to keep advocating, inspired to be part of a data revolution, and to keep working to bring positive change to all of those who need it most. Thank you all for being part of that. I'm honored and happy to be part of this community. Thank you very much.
Helle, thank you so much. Thank you. Helle, thank you so much. To have you endorsing our work is hugely valuable. Someone who actually knows what you need in order to make good decisions. Thank you so much. So go to the website, read the report, talk to our staff, enjoy the wine and the canapes. We have the rest of the evening together, and thank you so much for being with us tonight. Thank you.